Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Judy Detmer. I'm very glad to have you today for this webinar. I'm the Director for Strategic Partnerships at the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, NASHA, and I also support the Traumatic Brain Injury Technical Assistance and Resource Center. Next slide. Today's webinar is about trauma-informed approach to brain injury screening. We're very excited to be bringing this to you. It is sponsored by the Traumatic Brain Injury Technical Assistance Resource Center. We are the TA center that is funded by the Administration for Community Living. The Traumatic Brain Injury TARC is administered by the Human Service Research Institute with the assistance of NASHA, and our webinars are free and open to the public. This will be recorded and you'll have access to it as you wish. Next slide. I forgot to describe myself, which I always do, but I am wearing a dark jacket, a gray t-shirt. I have short hair and glasses, and I have signs or posters, I'm sorry, of Hawaii and Minnesota behind me. I'm also joined by my colleague, Maria Crowley, who will be monitoring the chat. So please do feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom to post your questions and to communicate with us as the host. Maria will be monitoring the chat. However, we will wait to ask those questions until Jack is done with his presentation. The webinar will be live captioned in English as well as live interpreted in Spanish. Live English captions can be accessed by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Live Spanish interpretation can be accessed by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's the world icon that you see down there. Terry, I'm going to have you share the Spanish version.
Sure. Se puede acceder a la interpretación en español en vivo haciendo clic en el botón Interpretation en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, el icono del mundo. Una vez en el canal español, por favor, silencie el audio original. Gracias. Judy?
Thank you, Terry. This webinar will include polls, so please keep your eyes open for those, and we hope that you'll respond when the polls are pulled up. Next slide. We always look forward to your feedback and follow-up, so after the webinar, you can send us follow-up questions and feedback, and the email address you can use is there, tbitarc@hsri.org. Please note that the email address is not monitored during the webinar. So if you have specific questions related to the webinar or any kind of technology issues, please put that in the chat. A recording, including a PDF version of the slides, will be available on the ACL website at acl.gov. Next slide. So we are going to move into our first poll. We always like to know who is in attendance. So if you could please go ahead and put in the poll what category best represents who you are. So we have quite a variety of people here. You can see the poll responses on your screen. So we're excited to have a good mixed group for this session. So without further ado, I would like to move us into introduction of today's presenter. And let's bring Jack up. While Jack is joining us, hi Jack. Jack Storti is a certified brain injury specialist and certified addiction specialist. He's the director of the Denver Reentry and Brain Injury Alliance at the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, where he began working in 2020. Through this program, he is a brain injury reentry specialist, providing support services to brain injury survivors who have recently been in custody and attending specialty treatment courts. In this role, he also provides technical assistance to court staff and probation and parole officers in developing reasonable and accessible accommodations to increase survivors' chances in achieving their various legal requirements and starting their lives. Jack has been working within the brain injury field since 2018 as an independent living skills trainer. He also has experience being a court-ordered treatment therapist for nearly a decade. He has lived experience in the legal system in the recovery from addiction and brain injury. Jack graduated from Metropolitan State University of Denver in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in Human Services Addiction Studies. On a personal note, Jack is very passionate about this work, and he and I have had some great conversations, so I'm excited for him to be sharing with you. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Judy, and for everyone having me today. And thank you, everyone, for being here and putting in the time and energy to invest in how we can be more trauma-informed to best serve our clients and further support brain injury survivors. If we could go to the next slide, please. Awesome. So here's our overview for today. First off, I'm going to share with you all about the Denver Reentry Program at the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado so that you get to know the various settings. I'm meeting with clients for intake and later meeting with survivors for continued services. These various settings are what inspired my changes to how I approach the screening tool, the OSU, the Ohio State University Brain Injury History Screening Tool, which has led to me attempting to meet survivors where they're at more and more and work with them to get what they need. I'll further share about the courts that the Brain Injury Alliance is partnered with and what these courts are like for clients. There are different courts, so there are many different experiences. Therefore, many different ways that I adjust my approach to be trauma-informed. Within this, you'll hear about the day-to-day process, which prompts a lot of those adjustments to surroundings, adjustments to communication styles, and adjustments to pacing the various interactions with survivors when connecting them to services and support. And from there, we're going to get into the Colorado Brain Injury Protocol, which is the screening process with a trauma-informed approach and intake considerations. I'll wrap up with recent data from the Denver Reentry Grant because I love data and I love that this program is proving itself to be needed and valuable. And I'm going to be sure to leave ample time for us to discuss this trauma-informed approach. Please save your questions until the end, and then we'll really get into them. We will have enough time to run some case consult examples and maybe even go over some challenges that you all have experienced in the past that you'd like to approach differently in your future. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so the Denver Reentry Program, it is funded by Caring for Denver Foundation, which was created in 2018 on a Colorado ballot initiative approved by voters in the city and county of Denver. This is where, through taxes, 0.0025% of tax sales, so 25 cents to every $100, goes into this foundation and then is divided up into the community to support in various ways. This support funds mental health services, suicide prevention services, substance abuse treatment and prevention, reduced use of jails and emergency rooms. And this funding cannot supplement existing funding. So there's no duplicative services. This is a very progressive foundation that's looking for new ways to support the community. The Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado received our first grant in 2020 under the Alternatives to Jail program services. And now we have a secondary grant expansion, which was just approved earlier in August of this year, 2023, and is going to allow us to hire more staff to build our reentry specialist team and develop a substance misuse relapse prevention program specifically for brain injury survivors, really the first of its kind. Now, the courts that you see here on your screen, these are the courts that we have current partnerships with them. They are on the county level. There's sobriety court. So clients going through this court are in their first or second DUI. There's wellness court, which is a court addressing continued engagement with the court. So they have one arrest and then they show back up. It's a short-term program, 60 days, that offers either deferred judgment or diversion. So either the case can get sealed and go away, or if you complete your requirements, it just completely gets put down on a lesser level and is a small infraction on the record. In Reach Court, this is a court that focuses on comorbidity of trauma and mental health. many dual diagnosis clients needing individualized services to address all areas of need. There's the HEM court, which is a helping, engaging, motivation community court. This is where people have been returning clients, coming back to the court, getting rearrested on low-level drug offenses. An outreach court is a community court that is held at homeless shelters, public libraries, even resource centers. And this is where people who are currently experiencing being unhoused and living on the streets can come in and address any open warrants that they might have, low-level tickets, or community infractions. They do not have to be unhoused. Other people who have a probation violation or an open warrant can come to these courts. So BIAC's role in these courts is to identify the brain injury survivors that are currently going through this process, whether they're in custody in the county jail or detention center or in the community. Since all of these are specialty courts, there's regular check-ins. Some of them have required treatments that they're engaged in. But everything that the clients engage with the Brain Injury Alliance is voluntary. This was really important for us so that the clients could choose their path. They can choose if they want to get screened for brain injury. They get to choose if they want to engage in our resources and our services. And we have some pretty high level engagement after intake because of the difference that this is their choice and path and individualized. Throughout this program, we also help the probation officers and parole officers with the protocol. Survivors get to learn about their brain injuries and learn new skills to manage the symptoms that they experience from their brain injuries. And with probation and parole officers, we help break down accommodations that can be easily implemented. Small changes to their day-to-day interactions with their clients that actually add up to the bigger picture to make a more healthy, positive working relationship and increase the client's success. Our new grant expansion is actually going to get us into 4 more courts. So we'll be involved in 9 courts total. As I said earlier, these 5 here are all county level. This grant expansion is going to allow us to get into district level. So these are larger, more serious legal convictions that people are facing. And therefore they need lots more support. These courts include the Denver District Competency Court. Competency is when it's unclear if someone understands legal proceedings and if they're competent to continue forward, or if they need a restoration process to be fit to be legally heard. Divert Court, which is if someone has had 4 or more DUIs. Adult Drug Court is called Restart. We'll be engaging with them with higher level infractions related to substance possession or distribution, and Veterans Court. A little bit more about what the reentry team does for the professionals and the survivors. We offer family member reconnection. Going through the legal system, family members often need to put up different boundaries. They've experienced a wealth of trauma with this survivor, not just related to their brain injury, but also related to the intersections of going through the legal system. So a lot of family member support, caregiver support, spouses and friends, so that they can get the resources that they need and find accommodations to help the survivor that they love. And we connect survivors to stabilization resources like getting housing, food stamps, health insurance on track, getting their IDs out of incarceration so that eventually they can get employment. And then brain injury specific. Maybe they've never met with a neurologist. Maybe they need a physical therapist. Maybe they need help filling out paperwork because of some of their symptomology makes applications difficult. So we do a lot in this program, and we have learned a lot since the beginning of the program in 2020. And therefore, we've been adapting our approach to the way that we are asking questions, having conversations, and connecting resources. Next slide, please. All right, on the day-to-day, we complete brain injury screenings, which we're going to go over today. But what I really want to highlight here is case management like. I put air quotes on that intentionally because we don't bill for case management and every situation's different. So some survivors need more support. Other survivors feel a bit more independent, are ready to stretch their wings, and they just need some guidance of where to start and how to start. So with case management style, it's really following up with them, helping them remember things. And, you know, if they have a phone, calling them the week after intake to say, hey, how are you doing? Have you taken the next steps on those resources that we talked about? And then we do a 3-month check. Hey, it's been a few months since I've heard from you. How are you? What's going on? We do a confidence scale survey at each checkpoint so that the survivor is gaining more awareness of where they're at. It also helps us make sure that nothing gets missed and falls through the cracks. And then we also check in with them at 6 months. Survivors are also welcome to enjoy and engage in the AHEAD groups. This is achieving healing through education, awareness, and determination. These groups are psychoeducational groups developed just for brain injury survivors experiencing the legal system. This is a curriculum that cycles through topics, including communication skills, memory skills, emotional dysregulation, addressing anger, even addressing grief and recreating identity after injury. In these conversations, we also talk about behavior and outcomes. If I choose this, could this get me in trouble with probation? If I choose this, will it help me or hinder me from completing my court requirements? We regularly stay available for technical assistance for court and community supervision accommodations. Just being available to field a phone call from a professional who's saying, I'm meeting with the survivor and I'm experiencing these challenges, or I'm noticing that the survivor's not being able to complete this certain task. Do you have an idea of what we could do to adjust things for the survivor? Final part on this slide is about reentry planning. Everyone gets a plan, whether they're in custody and looking at release back into the community, or if they're in the community and just looking for the next steps of starting their lives. For reentry planning, specifically for the survivors who are incarcerated, we start going over what do they need, what do they want, and prioritizing. A lot of our survivors struggle with remembering things, organizing information, and then how to prioritize it. So we will help identify a whole plan together and then follow through the connection. Unfortunately, some survivors are not looking at releasing back into the community soon. Maybe that's because they have a longer sentence. Maybe they're taking their case to trial, or like I mentioned earlier, they might have capacity raised. So their legal process gets slowed down while other things are addressed. So if they're not releasing anytime soon, they get a brain injury symptom reentry plan, which is an overview of what types of symptoms were identified that they relate to struggling with, and how anybody who interacts with them could accommodate them. This is an example. If a survivor struggles with memory, then we recommend, if this survivor has 10 requirements through the court that they're expected to achieve, instead of them all being due all at once, it's let's have 1 or 2 due at a time. We're going to commit to completing all 10, but breaking it down into smaller tasks, step by step. And we submit this to whoever the survivor approves us to explain this information to. Maybe this can be attorneys, public defenders, family members, and then the survivor gets a copy of this as well. Very clearly stated, these are the survivor's symptoms, recommendations for accommodations, and by implementing these accommodations, this is the hopes of items that could be achieved: sustainable employment, housing, completing probation, navigating away from the legal system, and hopefully not getting rearrested and recidivizing back. Okay. All right, next, please. All right, we're going to start getting into the heart of things. This is the brain injury protocol in Colorado to screen for injury history. The first part of the brain injury protocol is to work through a screening process to identify injury history. We in Colorado use the OSU, the Ohio State University screening tool that we have recently adapted and updated with MindSource Colorado to include non-traumatic brain injuries, which I actually like to call internal injuries. Because when talking to survivors, if I say, oh, you've screened potentially positive for a non-traumatic brain injury, I've seen visceral reactions where their bodies go backwards. To them, it was still a very traumatic experience. So I explained that we've identified an injury that happened on the inside, like a stroke or a substance overdose with resuscitation, rather than an external traumatic brain injury like a car accident or a tree branch falling down. There are other options for various populations, such as the Brain Check survey for youth. Just overall screening tools must be valid and reliable, sensitive to the population, and appropriate to the setting. The second part of the protocol is to explain the results. There are a lot of trauma opening questions on any of these screening tools. So then we have to explain, you just answered all these questions for me. This is what it means. And this is going to be our next step and our next plan. So we just open things up, and we want to make sure that we don't just leave someone open and vulnerable. The third step is then to go over the symptoms questionnaire. I like to phrase it as, we just identified your injuries. Now let's work together to identify how these past injuries are affecting you today, and what can we do so that you can be feeling better tomorrow and having a thriving future. We're going to go over the symptoms questionnaire today. And then the next step is explaining the symptoms questionnaire. I have a lot of survivors feel pretty relieved and express, wow, no one's ever asked me these questions before. It's like you knew exactly what I needed. Like, how did you know to ask this about memory? So they find a lot of relief, but then we explain the different skills and strategies that can be tried with this. It is trial and error. Every brain injury survivor is different. Once we've seen one injury, we've only seen one injury. No two injuries are going to look alike. So on this exploration adventure, survivors truly are getting to know their symptoms and what works for them and what doesn't. Explaining to a survivor, if you try a technique that I suggest and it doesn't work, tell me honestly, and then don't keep it. Let's figure out trying a new one, and if it does work, we'll keep it and we'll build on it. The next step of the protocol, after working through symptom identification and symptom strategy steps, is to discuss what type of resources the survivor might be interested in. Community-based services, maybe services through your local brain injury alliance or association, and then creating a plan. Will you be referring them to someone else, and that next person will be connecting with them, or will you be working with them on a regular basis? Again, making sure that there is connection throughout this process, connection and explanation. All right, next, please. All right, here we are. Brain injury screening, the trauma-informed approach. Actually, go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the expanded OSU version that we use in Colorado. The link that you've just received in the Zoom chat is directly to Ohio State University's page. So you get the background information of why this was developed, the evidence-based research, the processes, the additional tools that they have. If you're interested in learning more about the expanded OSU, feel free to reach out to myself after the webinar, and we can make sure that you get access to these resources that we use in Colorado. The original OSU was developed by Dr. Jennifer Bordner and Dr. John Corrigan, who I believe might actually be here. So an honor to share these adaptations and changes. Then this was also revised and developed by Dr. Corrigan and a larger supportive group of individuals, including Dr. Kim Gorgans, Liz Genderman, Jamie Horsfall, and Russia Nauer. These are all individuals here in Colorado. And this supportive group were also the great individuals that assisted me in putting together my many ideas and experiences with trauma-informed approaches into an assistive document that you actually already received with this morning's link, PDF of this presentation. That tool is a 2-pager. It's going to include a lot of the information that we talk about today, so that you can refer back to it and have some guides. That 2-pager is going to go everything from start to finish. A bit more about the OSU. I know that the screen is pretty small for you all right here, but it has guided yes/no questions. And then additional questions to confirm details of age, loss of consciousness, altered state of consciousness, and repeated injury. And then on the back, it actually comes to 4 deciding factors. What was the longest amount of loss of consciousness? Helping to identify the worst spectrum of injury, from mild, moderate to severe. Then age of first loss of consciousness. If there's any loss of consciousness before the age of 20, it's considered a pediatric brain injury because the brain was still in developmental stages. And with loss of consciousness, that development was placed on pause, and injury to those brain cells, the symptoms can show up later in life. We might experience an injury at age 10, but then we don't start seeing symptomology until maybe age 16 or 17. This is what I like to call the adult skill building. You know, at age 10, we have the guardians, or adults in our life who are managing our soccer schedule and who are managing packing our lunch and all of this organization and gathering of information types of skills. But then when we're in our mid to late teens, we start receiving more adult responsibilities, tracking our own schedule, following through, working on dependability and consistency. And we might start seeing some symptoms of why things just aren't connecting. Why is this teenager not remembering information or not being able to organize simple calendar skills? So worst, age, and then repeated injury. The third factor on the OSU is, has there been an altered state of consciousness or loss of state of consciousness repeated within 6 months? I call this compound injuries, where the brain was injured and then not able to recover from an injury. Common in sports athletes. Maybe we received a concussion last month, but then we received another concussion this month. And then if we receive another one, right, that's 3 altered state of consciousness or even loss of state of consciousness being knocked out within a short amount of time, and the brain is really starting to struggle. With the expanded OSU, we now have our 4th category, which is internal or non-traumatic brain injuries. So if someone answers yes to any on step 4, they likely have an internal non-traumatic brain injury. Okay. Regardless of the environment that you're facilitating a screening, it's important to just take your time, pay attention to physical cues, and let someone know what they're expecting. So letting people know, I'm going to guide you through some yes and no's. We're going to go through this and I'll explain afterwards. Provide encouragement that they're doing well throughout the process. You know, I often say things like, wow, it takes a lot of courage to answer these questions. Thank you for being so open. It's important to provide brief validations about their experience throughout it. Simple things like, that sounds scary. And please remember brain breaks. That's what we call here at the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado. When we just take a moment to take a deep breath, maybe that's a guiding deep breath. When you notice that someone's getting overstimulated, they're starting to grab their forehead, they're starting to cover their eyes because maybe the lights are pretty bright. They're starting to get overstimulated, might need a brain break of some silence, some deep breaths, and then restarting if they feel comfortable. I often get the question, how long should the OSU take? You know, in a magical world with all of us being so pressed for time, like 15, 20 minutes, depending on the survivor's answers. That's true for me. Sometimes though, survivors have a lot to their story that they wish to share. And we can learn a lot about their symptoms and about their entire experience if we just take the time to listen. Other examples of fatigue as they're explaining, even if they're going on long storytelling, signs of yawning, becoming more and more distracted, needing questions to be repeated more frequently. We may prompt the survivor by saying, I know this is a lot and can be uncomfortable to recall all these events. Why don't we take a moment of silence together and catch a few deep breaths? All right, next slide, please. Okay. So already mentioned, but I'm just going to keep building on some different items. So at the beginning of the screening process and throughout, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to remind them that there is going to be explanation afterwards. In the settings that I'm in, I sometimes have survivors be like, well, this happened to me, but I don't think it was a brain injury, or it wasn't that big of a deal, or I didn't get knocked out for that long. So I remind them, I'm going to give you some explanation afterwards. And a lot of people don't know that they might be brain injury survivors. So please allow me to gather the information and help come to the determination of what the results mean. It is what I'm here for. And do that gently, kindly. They are the expert of their own experience, and we're there to evaluate their experience. So it is sometimes a complicated line to balance with, especially if someone is incarcerated, having a really long day, being really upset. And this is, the third evaluation they've done in a week. Just this one is the first one on brain injury. People within the legal system can get really burnt out on answering traumatic questions and going over their history. They're like, you're just another person that I have to tell my story to. And we have to explain why we're asking and what we can do differently. Also letting them know that afterwards, once we get the results, we'll talk about creating a whole plan together. I'm not going to just leave them there with like, okay, great. I just answered all your questions. What do I do now? Other gentle reminders is that the survivors only need to share the information that they're comfortable with. Information can be, what was the injury? I was hit by something. Okay. Were you knocked out at all? Did you experience loss of consciousness? No? Okay. How about altered state of consciousness? Seeing stars, dazed, memory gaps, and age. It's really those 4 items. And then through getting those 4 items on the various injuries that the survivor shares, then we take a moment to review and put together the timeline, put together the story. Throughout screening, again, take notice if the client appears uncomfortable, shifting body language, starting to stutter in their speech later on, sudden language gaps, even statements like, I don't know, or frustrating, like, come on, I already told you about injuries. Why do I have to keep going? Even statements like, I'm a different person now. That can show like some moments of low self-esteem, feeling tired. This is just difficult information to go over. And I really love expressing gratitude throughout the process. Thank you for your time. This is voluntary. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for being willing to meet with me and seeing what new approaches we could try to support you in your situation. Next slide, please. Okay. The first question on the OSU is all about hospital visits and ER visits. At the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, we actually don't require any medical documentation for survivors to be eligible for our services. So we start with letting them know, there's a whole list of reasons why people don't go and seek medical attention. Maybe this might be because of abuse, lack of insurance, undocumented citizenship, low finances, lack of transportation, maybe the fear that they're going to get arrested because they have active warrants. So it's not required. We are going to ask about hospital and ER visits, but the way I say it is because it's an easy place to start. A lot of people remember going to the hospital. Whereas the other guided questions, it might take a second to remember, oh yeah, this did happen to me. Okay? So I start there, and I often have to remind people throughout the process, because, that's question number 1. And then suddenly on question 8, people will be like, oh, I didn't go to the hospital, so it doesn't count. And I'm like, nope, remember, it's actually not required that you got medical attention. Let's talk about it. Tell me more about that situation. Don't worry about the medical side. Sometimes brain injury survivors will go into an automatic brain dump. That's what I call the download of all their info. I'll be like, hey, I'm Jack. I'm a brain injury reentry specialist. And it'll just be like opening of the floodgates. Oh man, let me tell you about this time that this happened to me, right? And they just go for it. I don't stop them. I will let them just tell me their narrative. I will ask confirming details if I need. Like, oh, you said that you were blacked out. What's the next thing you remember? So that we can kind of try to figure out how long you were out for. Of course, this is a guiding tool. You're welcome to and encouraged to ask questions in order. In my experience, after using the OSU for 3 years, I can ask questions out of order and not miss any. So if someone starts telling me about a stroke that they experienced, I can start with that one, and then I can go on to the seizure questions before asking about the car accidents. As long as we ask all of the questions, if the survivor's telling us something in their download, follow their download. And you all are going to hear me talk about this later, of finding your flow. There are ways that these tools are very set up so that we don't miss anything. Also trust your trained experience and professional experience to follow the conversation to meet the client where they're at. There is a point on the OSU that the questions kind of dramatically shift. We go from hospital visits, car accidents and bike accidents, toys, ATVs, motorcycles, things of that nature, to falls, playground accidents as kids, and sports, to then suddenly at if other people have been harming this person. Abuse, assaults, intimate partner violence, domestic violence. So before getting to that question, I give a heads up. I say, hey, these questions are going to get a little bit more intense. Just bear with me for a few. That is the exact sentence I say almost every time during an intake. I'm often met with, okay, let's do it, or thanks for letting me know, or just a simple head nod. Because this next section is about assaults, abuse, if someone's been striked, if someone's been harmed by another person, or if items have been thrown at them. And then the next question is about gunshots to the head. And that one provokes a lot of responses, a lot of surprise, a lot of visceral reactions of big eyes and pushback of the physical body. So I like to soften that as well. All right, and my next intense question is, in the settings that I'm in jail settings where it's sometimes real loud, or the survivor hasn't gotten a lot of sleep, or at the homeless shelters, giving this preface that things are going to get a little bit more intense, I notice that survivors will look around them, check around their surroundings, make sure that they still feel safe. I will ask them when I notice they're looking around, do you feel safe to continue and have this conversation? Confidentiality is key, and avoiding overstimulation for me goes hand in hand with confidentiality. Having the conversation away from large, court participants or other people who are also incarcerated. In addition, about gunshot wounds, especially in incarceration settings, I've noticed a trend where some folks will say, well, how would I be talking to you if I got shot in the head? Why would you even ask me that? That's stupid. Like it really riles up their system. So for me, this is an opportunity to offer some brain injury awareness and education, sharing that there's many survivors of gunshot wounds to the head that, do survive and then experience life-altered reactions from that in symptoms and abilities. And a few times, ironically, I've had these folks that I'm interviewing have that big reaction, and then they end up going and telling their cell buddy about this. And then the cell buddy says, "Oh, I got shot in the head. I want to talk to the Brain Injury Alliance." So this is a growing opportunity, and being able to know that people are going to have questions, especially if this is their first time ever being screened for injury, if this is their first time learning about brain injury. A lot of these questions will seem out of the blue to the traditional, maybe substance use evaluations they do or mental health diagnostic evaluations they've done in their past. All right. Before we continue over to explosions and blasts, when talking about abuse, what I have learned in my experience is to use the person I'm meeting with, use their language. For me, this is also, I will admit I have maybe a bias or a precursor of experience, coming from a background of incarceration myself. But using their language is like, have you ever been jumped? But just simplify the language. Instead of loss of consciousness, say knocked out. So when I'm asking, have you ever experienced any injuries to your head or neck through abuse or assaults, I also include jumps, gang-related violence, things of that nature. Instead of loss of consciousness, I say knocked out and blacked out. Okay. For gang relation, I only mention or ask about gang relation injuries if the survivor themselves or client, because we don't know if they're a survivor yet, but client themselves has already mentioned gang affiliation or gang assaults that they've experienced in the past. When people are going through all of these areas, it's very common in my population that the most prominent injuries are related to jumps and assaults, substance overdoses, and suicide attempts, whereas general population is usually falls and car accidents. Survivors will often talk about repeated injuries. It wasn't just one fight that they experienced, it was many fights. And I witness a lot of survivors get really frustrated here. They start to mix up their details. They can't remember which fight happened first or which details go with which injury. Like, I know I was knocked out for like hours, but I don't know if that was the one from when I was 20 or when it was like when I was 25. So this is where I'll like slow down and encourage that they're doing a great job, and that they're supplying the details that I need so that we could start working together. And on the back of the OSU, there's specifically a section all for repeated injury because of how common it is. Go here and say something along the lines of, there are a lot of similar football injuries. Let's bring it down to some key basics. I hear that you've had many of these injuries. Which was the longest time you think that you were blacked out for? And then we're trying to filter it down with them. And how old do you think you were that time that you were knocked out the longest? We've already talked a bit about traumatic and non-traumatic injuries. The updated OSU has both external injuries and internal injuries. When we start to switch over to those questions, the format changes a little bit. Instead of like, has this ever happened to you? It's, to the best of your knowledge, have you ever experienced this? To the best of your knowledge, have you ever experienced a stroke? Have you ever experienced untreated seizures or epilepsy throughout your life? Within the internal injury section is also resuscitation. Maybe this might be from near drownings or strangulations where they lost consciousness and lost oxygen for 2 minutes or more. This is also where overdose history with resuscitation comes up. Sometimes survivors don't know what the word resuscitation means, so please be ready to provide examples of mouth-to-mouth, CPR, Narcan, naltrexone resuscitation, medical interventions to save your life. There is not a specific question on the OSU about suicide attempts, but when asking about resuscitation, I do hear a lot about being resuscitated from suicide attempts. So then it's up to you, the screener, to evaluate how does this fit in here. So when discussing suicide attempts, I will hear, examples of people jumping off buildings or bridges. So this can go under, for us, we do suicide attempt / fall. If there's ones related to hangings or overdose, I would do suicide attempt suffocation, suicide attempt overdose. And that's the way that we log the information so that we can track and see data trends. Just be prepared that this now comes up more and more. Before the OSU was updated in Colorado, I didn't hear as much about suicide attempts until we started talking about life-saving interventions. I do notice I skipped by the explosions and blasts. So this is the last final question on external traumatic injuries. And it is worded as, in your lifetime, have you ever experienced an injury to your head or neck through explosions or blasts? This is a question I often have to explain, especially after following the question about gunshot wounds. People will say, well, I've been around some gunshots before and, it made my ears ring. It makes sense to me why their brains are going like, oh, we just talked about guns and now we're talking about explosions. And so that's the type of answer I get sometimes, but explaining like, yeah, guns are really loud, but that's not an injury itself. What I mean is, have you ever been near or around any bombs? Some people do need further explanation, if you've been in the military, any explosive devices, exploding cars, exploding buildings, things of that nature. I love that everybody's asking questions. I know, I just want to let you all know that we see you in the chat. Keep them in there. We're going to get to a point where we're going to talk a lot about this here soon. Before moving on from any question, if you notice that they're still thinking, allow for some time so that they can find the answer. Brain injury survivors, some struggle with delayed processing. So if you ask one question and they're waiting, it's that their brain is really just going and finding it. The little cars in our pathways are trying to go to the information center and bring up that memory. If we ask a question too soon, then we restart that clock. They get stuck on that question. They didn't even hear our next question. So use those brain injury training mechanisms that you're coming to this screening with, and use them even if you're not sure if this person's a survivor or not. If they explain lots of repeated injuries in the section, ask them, did any other injuries come to mind, or are you ready to move on? And from my experience, I get, you know what? Yeah, I've got a couple more. Or no, that's good. What's the next question? By this point, you're creating a rapport, you're creating trust with your demeanor and the way that you are navigating with this trauma-informed approach. So as the conversation goes on, even with overstimulation and exhaustion, there is an understanding. Oh no, I'm done here. Thanks. Let's move on. I start to see some connection here. And I'll, after I ask them if they have any more injuries that have come to mind, I again thank them for their vulnerability, for their openness, and their engagement. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, the symptoms questionnaire is the third part of the protocol. So we've gone over the first two: screening injury history, and then explaining injury history. Explain your findings. hey, based on the questions that we went over today, we've identified that you've got some pediatric brain injuries. We've identified that you have some internal non-traumatic brain injuries. The one that you talked about with loss of consciousness for more than 30 minutes, that sounds like moderate. And this one over here where you discussed being in a coma for 2 to 3 days, that's what we call a severe brain injury. So here's some preliminary information from you or for you. And as we work together, you're going to get to know what this means more and more. I'll guide you along the way. What we're going to do now is figure out how these past injuries are affecting you today, so that then we can make some changes to give you a better tomorrow. Next slide, please. All right, find your flow. You'll find your flow at the OSU, but the OSU is very structured in a way that there's, not too much flow that can happen. But with the symptoms questionnaire through MindSource Colorado, it is a large document. It's 4 pages, which offers a lot of opportunity for flow to make it more conversational and continuing to build that trust and rapport. Again, explain why we're going over this. I give the instructions that I'm going to ask some questions in general terms, and you'll just let me know how you relate. The reason why I preface it this way is because some of the questions survivors will say, well, it really depends on the situation. And I want to validate that right from the beginning, and then I'll likely validate that throughout the process as well. Like, do you lose things that are important to you? Some survivors will say, well, it kind of depends on the situation. Like if I'm at home and in my routine, then I don't lose it. But if I have one thing in my day that changes, then I would lose everything. And so then I ask, okay, but in general, how often are you losing things that are important to you? And having to reframe that just in general. We know that every day and every situation can be different, but in your brain and your body, how do you experience various symptoms? With this being a large document, it goes over 9 significant areas from, learning style and organization to memory, emotional dysregulation, inhibition, delayed processing, all kinds. I do offer to read out loud the symptoms questionnaire, but I do encourage survivors to try to answer it themselves. I say, hey, if you're willing, would you be willing to read over this and answer this? And then if you start to have trouble, or if you would prefer, I'm happy to read it out loud. So I give options. As we know with brain injury survivors, it's better to offer options than provide open-ended questions. And again, this is about building trust and rapport. I'm very detailed with my instructions. So you're not voting for the next symptoms president here. Do not fill in the bubbles. This is not a Scantron test. Just do a check mark. Save yourself a lot of time and energy. This helps them. Also, I don't know their symptoms, so I'm trying to get ahead of symptoms. Some survivors can get really fixated and stuck, having mental inflexibility symptoms. So saying, hey, remember, you don't need to bubble it in. Just a check mark is fine. And also saying, just go with the one, there's no right or wrong answer. Just go with the one that you feel fits the best. It's a spectrum from, I don't relate to this, no, not at all, to a little bit, to, oh my gosh, yes, this really, really bothers me and interferes with my day-to-day life. Adapting to the person's environment. A survivor just recently told me that during an interview, hey, I've been unhoused for 10 years. And then me, the 8th question on the symptoms questionnaire is, hey, do you forget to turn off appliances like the stove? And I had a survivor say, you just asked me if I forget to turn off my stove when I told you I haven't lived in a house in 10 years. So adapting to what you've learned about their story. We really want to be mindful, person-centered approach so that we are individualizing these to still ask them and get the answer. So I'll say, I know you just told me that you've been unhoused for a really long time. But do you ever forget to turn off appliances? And I'm thinking that maybe for you, that might be like, do you ever forget to turn off the radio? Or do you ever forget to turn off the butane on your cooking stove when you're trying to heat up your tent? Really think about what is this human's experience and what type of appliances they might use. In finding your flow, you'll also find that some of the symptoms, they overlap. So the symptoms questions overlap. Not only like the symptom skills also overlap. Like building a routine helps with everything. It helps with managing our emotions. It helps with managing our memory. It helps us stay organized. But when we're going through the questionnaire, the first section is all about memory. And there's a question of, do you remember what you've read? Or do you have difficulty remembering what you've read? On the third page, there's more questions about reading. There's, do you have difficulty understanding what you've read? When you're reading or writing, do you have difficulty finding your words? Do you experience language gaps? So there's this connection. And I have found that just going through the symptoms questionnaire, question by question in the order it's presented on the page, isn't always the best flow, especially if a survivor is starting to share more information about a specific question. If I'm listening, they're also answering other questions and I can confirm information. Meaning, hey, do you forget the information that you've read? And they say, oh yeah, I forget stuff that I've read all the time. And I have to read it like 3 times to even understand one sentence. So I can turn the sheet and talk to and score them of, oh yes, and it's also a severe symptom and bothering this person that they're not understanding what they've read, instead of asking them the question over and over and continuing to exhaust them throughout a lengthy intake and screening process. Okay. Just taking a breath here. Brain breaks are good. Oh. So the next stage is to explain that the symptoms that we're finding, we're going to try some skills and strategies to address them. We don't want to just find things out and then not do anything about it. We can do things once we have awareness. I experience a lot of survivors being relieved that they're learning about their brain injury for the first time. They're relieved that they're getting to know their symptoms, that they've never had that before. I'll field questions. There's an entire section on concentration, so they'll say like, well, I also have ADHD, so I don't think it's brain injury, very similar to the OSU. Hey, that's still important information. Allow me to like really scale what's going on there. And I'll explain that there are separate and overlapping symptoms. And as we continue to work together, we'll connect you to both mental health and brain injury related services so that hopefully these symptoms can be settled down a little bit and you can start feeling better. So for the symptoms questionnaire, Colorado, you all received a link. You can fill it out and then it kicks back with an email that says, hey, you scored really high in this area. Check out this tip sheet. And it'll list 5 to 10 small tips, small tricks that survivors can start implementing on their day-to-day to help either with brain retraining, finding some recovery and healing, or skills and strategies to compensate for the way that the brain has changed and likely might not change back. An example of this would be in memory. We're trying to help retrain the brain by writing notes and keeping to a routine. By implementing a schedule and consistent note writing, we are engaging different areas of the brain and therefore moving information from short-term to long-term memory. But compensation is maybe we don't remember certain things, or our memory, our short-term memory is still not improving. So we have to compensate to prompt the thinking. A compensation strategy could be visual aids for memory, like setting up a whiteboard with dry erase markers or, those big calendars on your fridge so you know what you're doing that day. So when you enter the results of the screening tool to the online format, you get these tip sheets that break down the different tips. And then it also offers for survivors in the legal system to join the AHEAD groups, which were the psychoeducation groups that I mentioned earlier. They learn more about their symptoms. They get all kinds of strategy, accommodation, support in real time. And they also get to connect with other brain injury survivors who are experiencing similar things. And the building of a community is where it's at. The opposite of isolation is connection. The opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of depression is connection. Connection is a vital force that can make or break a survivor's trajectory in creating a thriving lifestyle that they are hoping to achieve again. You know, I hear a lot of survivors share narrative of, oh, I thought I was the only one who struggled with this. And I thought I was dumb. And I thought I was this. And it's just such negative self-talk. But then they hear other survivors share their own experiences with the same exact symptom. And they say, wow, like I'm not alone. And there's validation of, oh, I'm not stupid. I still have all of my intellect. My brain is just different now. And so I have to find different venues to communicate the knowledge I have and to communicate and connect with my identity. So we let them know that, hey, here's your strategies and skills that you're going to start practicing. You'll let me know what works. You will let me know what doesn't work. We'll work together on that. You can attend these groups if you want to. Again, they're voluntary. That really creates buy-in when it's someone's own choice to be like, I want to better myself. I'm interested in connecting. And we're also going to plan resources and working together on a larger scale, getting you connected to a physical therapist, getting you started with your food stamps, maybe some job training, all kinds of things. All right, next slide, please. All right, we are just about to the discussion section, but building on that resource part, which is that last part of the protocol, everything that we're doing here, even finding our flow in the symptoms accommodations, adapting the symptoms questions to survivors, that's all trauma informed. We're going to continue that to engage in a teamwork style with survivors to build out their referral sources and the resource connection for services. Sharing like, hey, I'm aware of a resource that I think might be really good for the situation that you described. Here is what it is. Are you interested in it? Please let me know yes or no. And when someone tells me no, I thank them. Hey man, thank you for letting me know that that's not the right fit for you. That's the only way that this is going to continue to work. You know, for me to be your reentry specialist, I need to know what you want. I need to know what you need. And if I'm trying to connect you to something that you're not interested to, then we're both wasting our time here. You know, I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to set you up for failure. Let's try a new strategy and let's do this together. And it's really rewarding to see people's reactions when I thank them for telling me no. You know, I'm validating their boundaries. I'm validating their independence. I'm validating their sense of self-advocacy. And in the AHEAD groups, we're really working on building self-advocacy, being able to explain our needs and ask for the help that we believe that we need and want. Based on their symptomology, survivors might need more assistance in identifying their resources. I imagine that there are a lot of people here trained in motivational interviewing, and we love our open-ended questions. So if I ask a survivor of like, yo, what type of support do you feel like you need? I will get silence or, oh, I don't know, or no, I think I'm good. But instead, if I ask, hey, do you have your ID and your social security card so that you could get a job? They go, oh no, I need those. I wasn't even thinking about those. Okay, are you interested in getting a job? Right, like really guiding. So I try to think of in our reentry process, stabilization goals that are not always brain injury relevant, like getting a driver's license back or a replacement birth certificate. That's not brain injury specific. But the fact that this person is not remembering that they don't have those, or the fact that they lose them all the time, that is brain injury intervention. They need support to get these and keep these. And then from there, okay, we've got you stabilized with your food stamps and your ID card. Why don't we also get you set up with a physical therapist now? So going through a process where we identify the resources with the survivor as a team, and then I will reflect back. Wow, man, we just identified 10 goals and tasks that you want to work on. That's a lot, which is great. Like, I'm so glad we identified those. We need to make sure that we practice our SMART goals, being real specific, measurable, making sure things are actionable. We can take action on them so that they're realistic, and setting ourselves up with a time frame. This entire process of trauma-informed care approach to screening to resource connection is actually role modeling a lot of the techniques in the symptoms accommodations and strategies. So, you know what? You know, I have survivors, their big end game is that they want to get their own house again. Heck yeah, let's get you your own house again. Stable housing all the way. Before we do that, we really need to get you an ID card so that the world knows who you are, and connecting the dots. You know, a symptom is not understanding connection and outcome. So we are connecting the dots throughout the process and always explaining what we're doing. Especially if someone can get easily distracted, setting up an agenda and saying, okay, first we went over this, now we're going to go over this. And explain why different things are more important than others and how they still connect to the survivor's larger goal. You know, end game is we're individualizing. Every injury is different. Every symptom is different based on spectrums. And then every person as a human is different. And they're getting to know themselves. So it's also a great opportunity as us service providers to get to know them and meet them where they're at. Next slide, please. All right, this is going to be my last slide before we just start chatting and running some scenarios. Like I said, I like data, and I'm pretty proud of our program. So this is data from 2022 to 2023. Right now, we are at the end of our year report, we finished with a 34% recidivism rate. This is a phenomenal rate, and it is really low. Recidivism means for us, getting a new arrest or a new court case. So getting in trouble with the law again and getting back into the system. Out of all of the screenings that we did, 87.5% were positive for brain injury history. And out of that 87%, or not just out of the 87, but out of all referrals and screenings that were done, 69.2 said yes to being screened for the first time of brain injury, first time even hearing and learning about brain injury. 46% of these individuals had anoxic injuries. So anoxic is the injury without oxygen. This was really important for my program to mark and capture because of the intersectionalities that this population faces with even higher rates of substance use and suicidality. So without oxygen, near drowning, strangulations, intimate partner violence, drug overdoses with resuscitation. I will mention, though, that the adapted, updated OSU screening tool that we used, we didn't start using until the 3rd month in of this year, of this data reporting year. So this 46% only captures 9 months out of the 12 months. And I strongly believe that if we had the updated OSU from the beginning of the data date, we would be capturing a lot more. I believe that some were missed. And I say that based on how many I'm identifying now and the fact that our current year to date of 23 to 24, that we're only just a few months in, we're sitting in the 80s around positivity rate for an anoxic injury being identified. And earlier I mentioned about our engagement rates. This cohort, 22 to 23, had 69% engagement. And engagement means that after intake, the survivor actually followed through to continue services with the reentry program and further with the Brain Injury Alliance. So it was not a meet and greet, it was a true connection. And this engagement rate, I can continue to see it change for the next few months because I do have some survivors in this cohort who are still incarcerated and looking to get released and connect to our community-based services. In fact, since I created this presentation for you all, the rate has already gone up to 72%. So that's cool. And for the prior year, 21 to 22, that first cohort that we had an 82% positivity rate of engagement. I can see the difference of engagement for a couple of different reasons. That first cohort had lower level cases. So in our next cohort, we've seen more legal issues like competency being raised, higher rates of incarceration timelines, and difficulties with release, like going to restoration inpatient services instead of directly to the community. So it's a process of us doing what no other type of treatment does and do the check-ins, maintaining contact, sending a survivor a text message. Hey, haven't heard from you for a little while. How are you doing? Continuing to visit them while they're in custody, even if they're not looking to get out for a 3-month and a 6-month check-in, and really saying, I care about you and I'm here. We started this trauma-informed approach, building trust and rapport, and we're going to keep it going so that they know that they have a brain injury community that they can connect to whenever they're fully ready. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening to me talk so much. Let's chat. Let's move on to the next slide.
All right.
99 plus chats. Cool.
There are so many questions. I'm glad Maria had that task because it was rapid fire. Such an awesome presentation, and I want to thank you for that. And we are going to open it to questions. I do want to comment on 2 of your data points that I find outstanding. One is the recidivism rate. Your recidivism rate that you're showing as a result of this program is bringing people with brain injury into the average rate of recidivism for those incarcerated. So that's a huge round of applause for that, for sure. And then the other data point is that about engagement, because we know it's very challenging for people to engage. So you guys are doing something right in establishing that trust and that relationship. And I'm guessing that trauma-informed screening is a big part of that. So thank you, Jack. So Maria, let's start the questions because there's a lot of them.
All right, it's a speed round, Jack. I hope you're ready. I'm going to work backwards for just a minute. In that, Amy Kratz asked, how many people does that data represent that you just shared?
Yeah, what a great question. All right, give me just a second and pull that up.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to just back up. Just so many excellent comments. And for those of you that said that this was a great session, I'm just going to skip over those and dig right into some of the questions. I hope that's okay.
And I've got my numbers here ready to answer that question.
Awesome.
So for the year of 22 to 23, we had 192 brain injury screenings. Out of those, 168 were positive. Out of those, 78 screened positive for anoxic or lack of oxygen-based injuries. And out of the engagement data, 122 people of the 168 positive brain injury survivors are currently engaged in BX services on an ongoing basis.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Great question.
Okay, I'm backing up to our first question, which it was from Adam. What is the confidence scale you use to help clients be able to see progress?
Another great question. So we use a confidence scale survey at intake, 3 months, and 6 months. It is a Likert scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I'm not confident at all, 5 being I'm completely confident. And it is a 10-question survey from things like, how confident do you feel like you can manage your brain injury symptoms? Which that's a fun question to get from people sometimes, especially on intake. They're like, well, I just learned about them, so none. But then on the, checking in with them at 3 months, they're like, oh, I've been working on those tip sheets. I think I'm at a 3. I'm seeing like I read better, I'm organizing information better. Those confidence scales also include things like, how confident do you feel like you can complete the court requirements and probation requirements? How confident do you feel like you could express your needs to your probation officer, separately, your therapist, or other clinical-based professionals? How confident are you that you can speak to your family members and friends, your supportive network, about your needs? Employment, housing, substance use, making and maintaining healthy relationships, all of those fall into that confidence-based scale survey. And then I do in real time reflect those answers back to the survivor of, ooh, I've noticed that you've gone down in how confident you are of like staying sober. What's going on with that, man? Like something difficult happening in your life right now? And so then we have this conversation, and quite frankly, before I ask, I say, remember, this stays between you and me. Like, how can I help you? What's going on here? I'm not going to report this to the court. And then they tell me, I get a lot of open answers of, it was a moment of celebration, or I'm experiencing this pressure and this, face from high risk peers in my life, and I don't know how to reroute. And so then we work, okay, why don't you come to the AHEAD groups, meet some pro-social sober interaction, and we'll connect you to some other recovery community resources from there.
Awesome, thank you. And Cheryl, I think that answers the question that you posted next with the response. So that was a twofer for you guys. Cynthia asks, so someone with a lengthy seizure has experienced brain injury. Is that true always?
Medicated seizures with loss of consciousness can be identified as internal injury. Of course, there needs to be some follow-up information from that, like age and other compounding factors of, did they receive a concussion 3 months before? Did they experience a long loss of consciousness as a child? But yes, unmedicated seizures with loss of consciousness, that's a red flag for internal brain injury. Good question.
Thank you. This one's from Cynthia. Nope. From Christina. Do you need to have any particular credentials to provide the screening tool?
Yes, I am glad you asked that. Usually I include that. Thank you for helping me out here. No, you don't have to have any specific credentials, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees. It's just a training of the OSU, how to administer, how to facilitate, and how to understand the outcomes. So the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, a big goal of ours is building capacity in the community. We want more people to be able to screen for injury all over the place so that then they can connect them to appropriate brain injury resources.
Perfect. Thank you. MJ had a comment about something she found helpful in doing very similar work with men in state prisons in Pennsylvania is to start with the phrase injuries to the head, or head injuries versus brain injuries. This seems to be an easier entry point. Would you agree?
Totally agree. Yeah. Especially like I hear stories of, psychological avowals being like, have you ever experienced a brain injury? And people are like, no. But then if you say, hey, have you ever experienced any head injuries? Can we talk about those? You get a whole opening of answers.
Right. This one is from Amanda. Do you primarily work with a younger population, or do you work with older adults as well? And if you're working with older adults, can planning include living accommodations at nursing homes or assisted living?
The Denver Reentry Program is for ages 18 and up in the legal system. So we have the whole gambit from like way young 18, like just 18, to 75 looking to get released. And yes, living accommodations, how even supportive living programs can support a survivor. I often connect with sober living case managers who are running the home. So they're supporting the survivor in resettling the community, supporting their recovery from substances and maintaining sobriety, and then asking, but they keep forgetting to shower. How do I get them to shower? And then I'm like, oh, routines. How about a calendar reminder or an alarm set on their phone? So all kinds of things like that.
Awesome. Do you change screening tactics if you're screening someone in a locked psych unit?
No, we still use the OSU. First we ask for consent. We explain that it's voluntary, it's confidential. The only way that I'm going to speak to somebody about it is if they approve a release of information. So it's, often, do you want me to speak to someone about your results and advocate for accommodations so that you can do better in this system?
Perfect. And Jack, you may have answered this, and it just might need to be highlighted again. What is a good approach when someone is coming in to an intake or a screening that brings someone with them who may be a perpetrator? We're thinking about an intimate partner violence situation. How do you dismiss that other person before you engage in screening?
What a great question. And thank you for being mindful of everyone's safety. I will first say, hey, I need to meet with you individually to ask you some first questions, but then, we can go from there, but I need to make some decisions based on meeting with you for a few minutes. And in those few minutes, I will explain that consent about confidentiality, voluntary ROIs for releases of information, and ask about safety, ask if they feel comfortable answering very traumatic, vulnerable questions in front of this individual. And if they say no, I will just put it on me and say, all right, we're going to proceed over here. I need you to stay out of the room. This is a private, confidential conversation. Perfect. Put it on me, put it on you. Do not put it on that other person. Because even if they say that they feel comfortable, or, they might say, no, I don't want them in the room, but yes, they're a safe person in my life. I don't know that to be true yet. So I'm going to say, sorry, you can't be in this conversation. I've got some specific legal things I need to talk to them about. Yeah, whatever.
Great response. Amy asked, isn't one of the symptoms of brain injury that some people don't realize that they have had a TBI because of the nature of their trauma or head injury?
Yes, they might not remember their injury at all. And a further symptom, agnosia, the lack of awareness of our symptoms. So they might even say no over the entire symptoms questionnaire, but then I'm noticing that they are really struggling to maintain attention. I'm having to repeat things. Their emotions are a roller coaster. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm not seeing that your answers are matching this. So what I do there is that, if they approve release of information, I will follow up with their referral source and say, hey, they did screen for potential injury here, but they did not screen for symptoms. So at this point, I can't move forward, because for my program, eligibility is that we've identified history and we've identified symptoms, so that then I can support you with those. Referral source, please let me know if this person starts saying, hey, I met with that guy and I've been thinking about the fact that I don't do this, or, we might just plant the seed for awareness during the initial screening. I have never had someone just completely not remember any injuries. I might hear of an injury from a referral source, like a real bad car accident, but then the survivor tells me about something that happened when they were a kid that signals maybe a mild injury. Plus I have this information, and then I can start collaborating information.
Perfect. And I think you have just answered this, but there were some questions about whether or not you find there are multiple injuries and whether or not strangulation or choking is specifically asked about.
So there's a couple of questions there. First, about repeated injury. It is likely that if someone has one brain injury, they have multiple brain injuries. Statistically, if you have one brain injury, you're 3 times more likely to get a second, third, and then if you have those, you're 8 times more likely to have more. So yes, repeated injury is a big deal. Hence, there's an entire section about repeated injuries. Yes, the last listed on the OSU under the internal non-traumatic brain injuries, it is, have you lost consciousness, lost oxygen from 2 minutes or more due to strangulation?
Perfect. I hate to do this. I know we have 5 minutes left, and I know we need to finish for being able to have some evaluation questions. So I'm sorry if we did not get to your question, but great discussion in the chat and lots of fabulous things. Judy, you're muted.
I realized I was on mute. Agreed. Great discussion, watching the chat, so many great comments. So I hope you'll take time to take a look at those, Jack. All right, last poll, if you could please take time to respond to this. If you have any suggestions or anything that you want to reach out to us directly about, again, you can email us. But if you could take a minute to do the poll, that'd be helpful. I'm going to read them for those who may be visually impaired in the audience. So the questions that we have are: overall, how would you rate the quality of this webinar? And the responses that you can give are excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. So again, overall, how would you rate the quality of this webinar? And then the second question is, how well did the webinar meet your expectations? The third question, do you think the webinar was too long, too short, or about right? And then the fourth is, how likely are you to use this information in your work or day-to-day activities? The fifth is, how likely are you to share the recording of this webinar or the PDF slides with colleagues, people you provide services to, or friends? And then finally, how could future webinars be improved? So I'm hoping that everybody has a chance to complete the poll. And with that, I just want to again give a huge thank you to Jack for this great presentation. I learn every time I hear you talk. So thank you for taking your time to present and share your wisdom on this topic. And thank you all for being here. We're grateful that you all have taken the time to listen. And again, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything comes up in the future. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.